Today I'm going to show you how to make an ammo can pellet stove. First thing you're going to need is a Fat 50 ammo can. You're going to need a sheet of metal similar in size to the ammo can. It's going to be a little bit taller as well because we're going to use this for the floor and the front door and also the tray to hold the dust. Next thing you're going to need is weldable steel hinges. You don't want anything with zinc in it. Also, this is the only thing I could find was a painted lock bolt. And then I got brass hinges, which I'm going to use for the door on the bottom. This is just the regular galvanized steel wire we're going to use and bend for our pellet collection. Also, you're going to want 3 tent stakes that need to be metal. You're going to want to get a barbecue skewer. This is mica, and it is like a plastic-like material. It's pretty flexible, and it's fireproof. This is automotive exhaust. You can pick this up at any O'Reilly's. It's nice, it's flanged. This is fiberglass that we're going to use for the window seal. And this is for the door seal. It's fireplace gasket. It's also going to be used for the top hinge door. Here's the adapter, which is going to go down to the basket. First thing you want to do is cut off the top handle. We need this to get out of here. So what I'm going to do is take and use a chisel and a hammer and drill out the rivets here. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it chiseled just right, they'll take and pop off, and it'll be a nice clean finish. I sanded it down just a little bit with my angle grinder just to get it nice and smooth. You want to remove the rubber seal that's underneath the door. Next, take your fireplace sealer, and we're going to go ahead and jam it down into the 2 plates where the rubber seal was. We're doing this just to make sure that we have the right amount of seal before we lay down our glue. This is the easiest way to do it, is just to go ahead and mock it up and cut it to length. That way there it'll be a lot easier to put down fast when the glue is drying. Now that we have that measured and cut, go ahead and use the fireplace glue sealant that came with the gasket kit. And we're just going to apply our liberal amount in the little crevice that's in there. Before it dries, go ahead and start pushing it in. Make sure that you jam it in nice and tight. And this stuff is a little bit stretchy, so be careful not to overstretch it because it will change the length throughout the entire process. So I kind of left it, as fat as possible. Next, I'm using a drill to start a guide to cut out the holes for the exhaust and for the pellet feed. Here we are just taking and using a jigsaw to cut out the 2 round holes for what I just mentioned, for the exhaust and for the pellet feed. Next, I just took and I smoothed out the metal that we cut from one of the holes. It's going to be repurposed for the flue. So you can see that we need to get that down a little bit to fit in the pipe. So I sanded it again, and I got the correct diameter to fit in the pipe. You don't want it too big, and you don't want it too small. It just needs to be nice and perfect in there. I'm absolutely terrible at welding, and my welder didn't work too good, but I went ahead and welded the feeder and the exhaust pipe as best I could. You can tell by my terrible slag that this is probably the worst welding job that you'll ever see. What you could do as well, if you wanted, is you could hammer down and use rivets to hold this in place. if you don't have a welder, that is. To clean up the welds, I took and I used JB Weld Extreme Heat. The Extreme Heat formula is rated to 1200 degrees versus high heat, which I believe is rated to 500 degrees. And the regular is not rated for high temperatures. So make sure you look for JB Weld Extreme Heat. And go ahead and, smooth it out or round and let it harden. Now that we have that done, I'm going to start looking at cutting out the oven door for baking. I don't remember how tall I made it. I think it was about 3 inches tall. But again, I'm using a drill to pilot and then a jigsaw to cut out. You want to make sure that you cut the bottom of the oven door flush. Now that we got that all nice and flush, you can see our oven is right here. We're going to move on to the next step. What I have here is just a piece of sheet metal. I've measured off the 3 inches and I'm bending it, and then I'm cutting off the excess. And now I'm bending over one more time to make a nice U-shaped lip to keep it a little bit cooler. It'll still get hot, but this is a lot better than nothing. And it'll just sit on here just like that. The next step is to cut out a section for the floor and the canister. That'll be the door, or not the door, but the ceiling in the oven. And then I'm welding that in place just right above the oven. Making sure to spot weld first. Next, I'm just cutting a little channel for the metal to go in between, and then cutting off a section of metal for that channel. To figure out where my holes are to line that channel up, I'm using just a really long stick with a Sharpie and marking that ceiling or that floor of the oven. As you can see, here's the 2 circles I marked. Doesn't need to be perfect. And then we need to put our divider plate in here. I'm going to tack it in just a little bit with my MIG welder. I went ahead and finished the welding, and it fits nice and perfect because I put a bend in it so it goes in between the pipes. Next, we're going to cut out the door that we feed, or not feed, but actually view the basket where the pellets are. It's to start the fire. I went ahead and sanded it nice and smooth, prepping it for the seal, which I'm putting down a nice liberal coat of glue on. Once you put your gasket down, go ahead and put a weight on it and let it sit overnight. Okay, now that that's nice and dry, I got a piece of fiberglass on there, and I'm drilling holes with a piece of metal frame that I cut a little bit larger. I'm going to run rivets to hold the metal and the mica and fiberglass to the front of the ammo can. I'm starting off with just the centers to get it prepped, and then I'm going to go ahead and put rivets approximately an inch or so apart, just because I wanted a really good seal. Okay, so we got that down. Now we need to mount our door. I got some small brass hinges. They're like dollhouse size hinges. And I went ahead and just riveted those in, drilled and riveted. They're about an inch hinge, I believe. There we go. We got a nice oven door that opens and closes with ease. The next step is to make the door for the lighter or the feeder. I went ahead and drilled and mounted my hinge. And next I'm putting the bolt lock in, which I'm drilling and riveting again. I'm tightening it down. This is a little slider mechanism that I made. This will hold the adjuster. I put a spring in there with a penny to kind of hold it in place with a little bit of tension. And then we need to cut some holes through that and through the door, the circle part and the door. And what I set up was 4 holes, because that's all that pretty much fit. You can see as I turn it and open it, you have 3, then I'm adding a 4th hole here. The other thing too that I should have done is put a vent on the bottom. This is a barbecue skewer, it's metal. It is going to be used for the flue. It's a flat metal piece, so I can drill and put a screw in it. So I drilled a hole through the exhaust, and now I'm mounting a screw to the flap, or the flue. You can see we can open and close it. I'm cutting out a little notch for the flue. That way there's room for the rod to spin. Again, I used a spring to kind of give it tension with a penny, and you can kind of open and close it. I'm cutting off a piece here, and this is a tent stake, and I'm going to mount these using rivets. I'm going to use 3 tent stakes to collect the ashes from the burn. I'm just trying to get the size down perfect so it slides in and out of the door with ease. There's a little handle from the tent stake that I just mounted in there, so you got a little bit of a handle. Even though that gets piping hot, it gives you something to hang on to when you go to clean it out when it cools off. All right, so here's the pipe for the feed tube. I took and I welded a piece of additional round cut from the can, and then I used JB Weld to fill it in so it's airtight on the cap. Next thing that I'm doing is bending the metal wire so that will hold our pellets, and I'm making it the size of the adapter pipe that's going to sit on the inside of the canister. So I bend it around and bend the pieces of metal wire so it stays closed, and now we're going to mount the adapter to the inside, and you can see there's a gap which I can fill in with JB Weld. Kind of left it open for right now for testing purposes. All right, so we're all set. Now we're going to have to go ahead and get a nice pellet fire going. So let's go ahead and pop on our feeder tube. Here is our exhaust tube, first section, and then here is an extension. You want a long piece for draw. I'm going to fill it up. I'm just using 2 cups to get started. I use a propane torch to get it going, and you got to constantly kind of keep blowing on it until you got a really good ember. And then once it starts pulling, the flame just starts pouring. This thing heats up quite a bit. I baked a pizza in it in the bottom section, and it worked out really well. You can also boil water or cook on the top of the cook surface as well, and it will last hours. You could sleep overnight if you fill that tube up when you're camping.